Hi, BookTube. It is Peg from the History Shelf.
And Bill Ruttenberg from Ruttenberg.library.
Yeah, and we're here. We had a buddy read recently, and we're here to have a book chat on H.W. Brand's latest book, Zealot and the Emancipator.
Yep, was a really good book.
Yeah.
Looking forward to our chat. And
yes.
It should be fun.
Yeah. So we finished this about like a little over a week ago, Bill. I think probably like 10 days ago, I'd say. Yeah, so I think, and I've talked elsewhere a little bit, just giving a little preview of my reactions to it. But yeah, what overall do we think of Mr. Brand's recent entry into the field here?
Well, for me, I think that I agree a lot with what you said on your previous videos. That I have been an H.W. Brand's fan for a long time now. I love his work. This book probably was not maybe up to the par of his previous works, but I still enjoyed it. I don't want to say I didn't enjoy it. I did enjoy the read. That was kind of my initial take on it.
Right. Yes. I'll just expand on that. I know when we we're on Boxer, with Buddy Reads, we do our weekly check-ins and stuff like that. I was saying in the beginning, like, wow, this is it's kind of slow going here, because it seemed like the one thing I did notice throughout the book, it did get better in the middle and towards the end, was that he relied a lot on excessive use of quotes. Like he quoted just so liberally that it was almost too much, and I was wanting more original analysis.
Well, and to add into that, when you look at the back on your sources, so like them first couple chapters especially, I'll flip to it here real fast. His notes were pretty slim, I thought. So when you're saying he was liberally taking from his sources, it wasn't even a lot of sources, it was only a few sources. That bothered me a little bit. And that wasn't typical Brands either, I didn't think.
Yeah, he was definitely like sticking to one source material and like a journal entry or a letter and almost reproducing it whole. And it would go on. And one thing I did notice, and actually an astute viewer commented somewhere when I first hauled the book.
I saw that.
You saw that, where they said the quote use, and I was like, oh gosh, well, I hope that was, an inaccurate description. But then as I started reading, I'm like, that reader got it right.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I even noticed the way he structured the paragraphs was annoyingly the same. Like it was like he would start off with one quick sentence and then the rest was quotes. You know what I mean? Like he had like these little sentences that would introduce the rest of the quote, and it would the conversation with Brown impressed Dana and his friends, and then boom, quote was the rest of the paragraph. It was a quote. And then the next thing, it was another transitory sentence, like a transition.
Well, he does it pretty heavy at the end also, when he's going through like right he does that the exact same thing, just huge quotations, and there wasn't a lot of analysis to go with it. So I agree with you on that.
Well, luckily it got better as he was moving into Brown's, attack on Harper's Ferry, and then into the Lincoln Douglas debates, which I thought was a very strong section. I really enjoyed his analysis of the arguments that both were making and how they were doing it rhetorically. I thought that was really, it made me interested to read more. I've been wanting to read more about the Lincoln Douglas debates, and so Brands kind of gave me a little intro into that as far as the arguments being made. But
well, you want a book to add to your TBR?
Yeah, of course.
Because I know you need more.
Because I need more.
Well, Alan Gelzo's book, Lincoln Douglas debates.
Alan Gelzo wrote one on that. Okay.
Oh yeah, and it's a really good one. It's got a lot of analysis.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Everybody out there, you got something to add to your TBR as well.
I wish I don't, it's upstairs. I don't have it right here with me, or I'd show you. Sorry about that.
No problem. No problem. So, well, I don't know, as far as I have some notes about certain things I found of interest, but do we want to kind of just take the viewer or the potential reader through the book as far as like it, we start off with almost like a chapter by chapter introduction of, John Brown, and then what was Lincoln doing around the same time, right? It
Yep.
was like leapfrogging.
Yeah, it was going back and forth a little bit, and then as it got into the book, you'd have maybe 2 or 3 chapters on one, and then 2 or 3 chapters on the other. And like you said, it started off, gave a little bit of background on John Brown, just his religious background, I think. To kind of give you, I always call him, with the kids when I'm talking to them, he's kind of like an Old Testament prophet, and that's kind of how I always describe him. And of course, it also gave the some of the details. He was married twice and had 20 kids. That one always blows the kids' minds. 20 kids. So just some of that background at the very beginning, just to, so you can kind of get to know John Brown. And I found him to be a little bit of a transient character, moving around all over the place.
Yes.
And I was not familiar with a lot about John Brown. So a lot of this was brand new to me. And so I kind of enjoyed that, just so I could get to know him a little bit better. And I need to go find another book on him is what I need to do.
Yes. And I have a book that was recently came out from Casemate Publishers, and it was called John Brown, the Good Terrorist. And that one sounds very intriguing to me because it's making a very provocative case, that he was, and we talked about this in our Voxer chats, was he a murderer or a martyr? And you were mentioning how you try, how you teach your kids in your class. That's kind of the question you put to them. How do you teach this type of person in history?
Yeah, and it's one of those, kind of one of those big historical questions. When we're teaching, we at least in social studies, we're using this DBQ method, trying to teach kids to read documents and stuff, and read into what they're seeing, and try to formulate their own opinions on stuff. And so that's always one of our big questions: is, was he a murderer or a martyr? And you always get a little bit of each depending on the kid and their background and stuff. And that was fun. And I thought that Brands did a pretty good job with that, especially at the end when he was wrapping things up. I thought his conclusion was really good with that.
He did end strong. On that. Yep. Just curious, what is the DBQ method?
Document-based question. So they give you a big historical question. So, basically a question that could go either way. And then they give kids some documents from both sides of the fence, and they get to decide what they think. So like an example was the Boston Massacre. What happened on March 17th? Wasn't that the date? I think that was the date. That sound right? That sounds right.
I think so.
Anyway, hopefully I'm not wrong. It's going to be embarrassing. But anyway, what happened on that day in history? And they give the kids, like, first of all, they start them off with the paintings from the etching from Paul Revere, and then they do some etchings that are
you think you're frozen there, Bill. Okay, now you're back. Yeah, we've had a little bit of freezing in this video.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Basically they give the kids both sides of the story, and they get to, using evidence, they have to come up with the historical argument. And it's a really good program. Stanford University, I use them a lot in their it's reading like a historian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you get on their website, you can find all kinds of little teaching lessons. It's really cool.
Awesome. Okay, great. Document-based questions. That's outstanding. I should be using that with my own review process, just to hold the historian to account, Yeah.
Well, what else did you think stood out in the book?
Yeah, well, I have, you know what, I want to get your opinion on this because it came to me after we finished our Voxer chats about the book. But looking back on it, I think H.W. Brands was really hard on Lincoln in this book. I
Yeah,
don't know if you noticed that.
yeah, I did.
Especially with what he chose to quote Lincoln on, and I found very interesting. He did not paint him in a very good light, especially when it came to emancipation, uh, the timing of the proclamation, when he was going to release it. Especially hard to read was the meeting with Frederick Douglass and I think some of the other Black abolitionist leaders at the White House. And he was very frank with them. And he's got it down word for word, like what he said to them about, I don't think, the two races are equal, but you should have the rights to earn, it's this kind of stuff. And I was like, wow, well, he's laying it all out there,
Mm-hmm.
So, it's, we shouldn't make Lincoln a saint because he wasn't. We're all human beings.
Mm-hmm.
We all have flaws and we're all a product of our time in some ways or another. But at the same time, it's like, well, Lincoln really did something that had a good, a good impact on humanity. So, but, I think I was just curious what you thought about his portrait of Lincoln in this book.
Okay, so for me, everybody that follows my channel knows, Lincoln's my guy, and
That's right.
I have so much respect for him. What he
Yeah.
was a human being. He made mistakes, but what I think of, let me give you my thoughts on Lincoln, and then I'll tie it in.
Yeah.
Because this will kind of answer, I think, one of the questions you asked in our Voxer discussion. But I think that a lot of Lincoln's stuff was based on timing. I think he was a constantly evolving person in history. I think that he started off with the typical thoughts of the people of the 1850s. Um, I try not to judge people too much in that light, because I'm not sitting in the 1850s with them, just trying to put things in context. But I also see Lincoln go from that to evolving down the line, and he has that meeting with all the African American leaders, but also think a little bit further down the line when he gets reelected in 1864, and then in 1865 he gives his inaugural speech. And what's the first thing he does when he's shaking hands with everybody? He goes across the room and grabs Frederick Douglass while everybody else is trying to throw him out of the room. He makes huge
That's right.
gestures like that
Mm-hmm.
to me he may have made some really bad comments during that meeting.
Yeah.
But I think that he changed over time. I think that he was constantly evolving his thoughts. I thought that was something when I read Lincoln, I think that's awesome. He's not set in stone. He's willing to adapt and change. And I think that, as far as the emancipation goes, a lot of that was just timing. I think he was the master of timing. He knew when to do stuff and when not to do stuff, and he knew right when he had to wait for certain events to happen. I that's kind of my take on it. I don't know if I'm rambling here, but
no, not at all. I think you're really you raised a point that I didn't really consider. It's just in the timing of how things were laid out in the book and the timings of the things that happened in real life, is that you're right. We were watching him change his opinions about his own sense of, white superiority or whatever. I mean, he started to really see people as he was living and breathing the writing of the Emancipation Proclamation and hearing from Douglass and all the other, people kind of talking to him about what, he was taking these moral lessons from other people, filtering at them through his own sensibilities, and his, intellect. And then, and of course that has to have an impact upon who you are and the, your assumptions about things. So obviously you're right. I mean, he did show that he could change his position. And I just, you just wonder what could have been if he hadn't been assassinated,
Yeah, how much better could Reconstruction have
Oh,
been if he was the one in charge instead of Johnson? I
that's
mean,
it. Yeah, Reconstruction would have been seen through to
totally
the end.
let him up.
The troops would never have been pulled out.
Hmm.
It's almost in a sense, with Reconstruction failing, it's like the South actually did win. You know what I mean? In a way, it's like, uh,
Well, and the weird thing is, you read those other books down the line, and John Wilkes Booth thought he was doing this great thing for the South, and a lot of the Southern leaders turned on him and said, "What are you thinking?" They kind of came to the realization that, I mean, maybe they didn't like Lincoln, but
yeah.
they realized that Lincoln was the one that was going to bring it back together on a easy, it'd be a little bit easier for them versus how it went.
And how it went. Yes. Yes. I can see where, well, they knew that people would be wanting some type of vengeance against the South, but again, and Reconstruction is one of those periods where I am fully steeped in all of the Civil War and a little bit of the leading up to the Civil War. I've read so much on it. And now I really want to study Reconstruction because
Hmm.
it's so key, I think, to what sort of the pangs that we kind of feel now in society is, that Reconstruction failed. But and to get back to Lincoln, though, yeah, I think he was evolving, and I think he would have been a good example, a good model for people.
Hmm.
It, I mean, that it was going to have a huge impact upon their society, having free former slaves and just having to work together, two different races. And it was really going to rend society. And I think Lincoln would have been a great person to lead that type of, look, we can evolve, we can change our perceptions, and our assumptions of others, and to act morally towards each other. So yeah, I mean, obviously it was
Well, and
but
then Brands was pretty hard on him, like you said, and I sit and I think about like early on when he kept trying to he was trying to do everything by the law because he held the Constitution to its that's the standard we've got to hold ourselves to, and if we're going to change the situation, we got to change the Constitution. And not that the abolitionist movement was bad by any means. I mean, it was a good movement, but it had to come at the highest levels. And I think that is a lot of why he was trying to put that compensation package together. He was trying to make it lawful. And I think a large part of it, anytime you lead people, if you come up with a new program, you got to get them to buy into it. I mean, I think I kind of, in my head, I had coaching in mind. When I
mhm,
come up with something, or my other coaches come up with something for the kids, we've got to get those kids to buy into the program, or the program's not going to work.
right.
And I think Lincoln was really big on, putting together a package that could possibly make everybody happy and get everybody to buy into it so that they would all take ownership. And then down the line, it would be easier in coming together. That's kind of how I view it.
Yeah, and you're right that that takes a consummate politician to do that.
Oh, yeah.
To
He was
try to
the
get that
only.
buy-in. Wow. You have to do things you really don't want to do sometimes with people you'd rather not have to deal with, you know what I mean? Or
Yeah,
or
I'm
or
sure he
throw a
did.
bone to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm sure he did not want to, with John Fremont and
Mhm.
who's the general down south.
Lee Jackson, what who we
No, that emancipated early.
Oh, was it
He
oh,
was,
David Hunter? Was it?
I'm sure,
Oh, hang on, you froze
one of
again. Now you're back.
I'm,
Okay.
I'm
It's okay.
I don't think that he disagreed. It was more because he needed things to work legally. I think he liked the idea, but he had to get things legally.
You're right. You're right. That does come across strongly in this book, was his Lincoln's devotion and reverence for the law, the Constitution. He's constantly quoting it. He quotes it, and I mean, Lincoln does, and he's going back to it over and over. in his debates with Douglas, Stephen Douglas. It's, especially, and that was the other part of the book that was really interesting, was the after Douglas kind of squashed the Missouri Compromise, right? And opened up Kansas and Nebraska to, say, hey, it's up to you whether you guys want to be slaver free. And then that just threw everything into chaos. And Lincoln that was what pushed him, right? I think to get back in was
1854, right? 1854.
That's when he said, what is Douglas doing? Stephen Douglas, he is going, basically he's saying, with the way it's written, this law, that now slavery can be opened up into the North. And we just said that we were not willing to go that route, and then he goes back to the Constitution to talk about, well, popular sovereignty, what's the legal status of a territory versus the state, and so I mean it was just fascinating, and
got into some nitty gritty stuff.
He did. It was like, I need a law degree to read some of this stuff.
Well, if you liked that, I'm telling you, you're gonna like that Alan Gelzo book.
Excellent. I have it written down right here.
I'm telling you, he breaks that thing down. He does a really good job with it.
Yeah, I like his work, but yeah. So that was what I got an overall feel for, how Brands presents Lincoln. And I thank you for pointing out the fact that, towards the end of the book, you see how he shows that Lincoln was evolving in his own views, and setting the example, like by reaching out to Frederick Douglass, after the inauguration, right? The second inauguration. Yeah.
Well,
or was it was
first inauguration.
First? Okay.
He died shortly. Douglas died shortly after that.
Or Lincoln did, obviously, after the second inauguration.
Okay, repeat what you said.
When did he reach across, and when Frederick Douglass was in the room and everyone was like trying to push him out, and Lincoln went over to him?
Oh, you said Douglas. I'm thinking.
So I know there's a Douglas with one S and two S's.
I've got the wrong Douglas. Douglas.
I know.
Frederick Douglass. That was the second inaugural. After the second inauguration.
I was like, Stephen Douglas died. What?
Yeah, I'm sorry, wrong Douglas. Oh.
We needed some laughter there. I was getting heavy. The other thing I earmarked, and then I'll let you, obviously share with me what some of your other things that jumped out at you is, I loved the chapter, and I think we talked about this on Boxer, where Douglas's like speech against, well, he was showing his irritation with Lincoln. Like, why are you not striking at the power of the South right now, which is the slaves, right? And he had some, are
you talking towards the end of the book?
Yeah, I think I'm looking at chapter 46, which, page 327, 328.
Yeah, you want me to read it?
Yeah, which part did you have highlighted for that?
Page 329.
Oh, yeah.
I because I'm going to use this in class.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, he says, let's see here. It is far more true to say that we cannot reach the rebellion until we have suppressed slavery. For slavery is the life of the rebellion. Let the loyal army but inscribe upon its banner emancipation and protection to all who will rally under it. And no power could prevent a stampede from slavery, such as the world has not witnessed since the Hebrews crossed the Red Sea. I am convinced that this rebellion and slavery are twin monsters, and that they must fall, flourish together, and that all attempts at upholding one while putting down the other will be followed by continued trains of darkening calamities.
Yes.
That was the quote I pulled. I really liked that. I thought that was really good. Sorry, I was reading my chicken scratches.
No. Yeah, that's powerful stuff. I don't know anything that Frederick Douglass said that wasn't powerful, and got to the heart of the matter.
Well, I tell you, after reading this, because a good chunk of this is on Frederick Douglass. I
Yeah,
I was very happy with that. That just made me fired up to read that biography.
I know. Sorry that the read
Oh,
along
this
is a little
is
pushed out.
awesome.
um, so the quote that I picked out was his, it was on, I think, 328. Um, let me see here. So he was saying here that he was getting really tired of Lincoln trying to appease the South. He was
Mhm.
becoming more and more infuriated with Lincoln. And he was infuriated when he was doing that with words. And then at this point he's saying, but it's not even now, it's we're at open war with the South, with the slave states. And still you want to try to, ease their way to come back in. And he just was like the 4th of July, 1862. And he says
Mhm.
here he took that opportunity to excoriate Lincoln for his failure to confront the central challenge of the war. And I'll read my quote here. Quote, "It is by what President Lincoln has done in reference to slavery since he assumed the reins of government that we are to know what he's likely to do and deems best to do," Douglass told his audience. "We all know how he came into power. He was elected and inaugurated as the representative of the anti-slavery policy of the Republican Party. He had laid down and maintained that the doctrine that liberty and slavery were the great antagonistic political elements in this country, that the union of these states could not long continue half free and half slave, that they must in the end be all free or all slave." And then he just outlines, in the conflict between these two elements, he arrayed himself on the side of freedom and was elected with a view to the ascendancy of free principles. So that's his setup to saying, what does this policy of bringing back the union imply? It implies, first of all, that the slave states will promptly and cordially, and without the presence of compulsory and extraneous force, cooperate with the free states under the very Constitution which they have openly repudiated and attempted to destroy. And then he just lays out how slavery, if it continues in the South, it would be the dominating interest, opposing all other national interests. But it was just it was a long, speech, and you got to it on 329. I kind of went to the beginning of his speech. That he says basically, you must abolish slavery or abandon the Union. It is plain that there can never be any union between the North and the South, while the South values slavery more than nationality. And I was just like, wow. I don't know. I just think that was very powerful. And
Well, he kind of threw Lincoln's words right back in his face.
yeah.
Because a lot of that you were quoting was his
Mm-hmm.
1858 acceptance speech, right?
About a house divided against
Yeah,
itself
House
cannot
divided
stand.
speech. Yeah. So he just kind of threw it right back in his face, and
He did.
you know, yeah, this is what you said, and
Yep.
yeah, you're really what you're preaching here.
That's right.
So,
That's right. Um, well, we're talking about Lincoln. Let's talk a little bit about John Brown too, I guess. What you kind of came away with, what you learned. I think you mentioned you wanted to kind of read some more after this. But I think, well, I'll let you speak first. I want to know what you think about John Brown.
just what I think in general about him.
Well,
Uh, Go
yeah,
ahead.
and if you learned anything somewhat new, I think maybe through the letters and things that he was quoting. And
My biggest take in when I teach it in school, like I said, I've never read a biography on John Brown. So we teach. I talk about bleeding Kansas and going out to the Potawatomi massacre, and then we go pretty much straight ahead to Harper's Ferry. And I've read before about his trip. I read about his trip with the slaves, taking them to Canada and getting them freed. I
yeah,
read about that once, but I never realized he went back to Kansas again and was basically leading a miniature army there. I mean, on a very small scale, but he was leading out there still. And I did not realize that. I thought he went north and then went into hiding pretty much.
Okay. Yeah.
I just not read. I was ignorant in that area. And so I found that to be pretty amazing that he went out there. And, something else I found kind of unique about John Brown is, as a father, I can't imagine taking my kids and putting them in harm's way like he did. And I think they willingly did it, but just the fact that you put your kids in harm's way, I mean, you have to be all in your cause to do that. And that was kind of impressive in a good and bad way, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there was a part during the Harper's Ferry raid where they were kind of all, surrounded at that point by the national troops, stuck in that little armory there. And one of his sons, Owen, who was shot, and he was just kind of laying in the back moaning, and at one point, so they kind of like suffered throughout the night. And at one point, John says something to Owen, doesn't hear anything, looks back at him and says, "Oh, he must be dead." And then he just kept moving on. I was like, damn, that's cold.
Kind of matter of fact.
That was cold. But like you, I didn't know a lot about John Brown apart from Harper's Ferry. So, the going north with the slaves, that was new for me. Did not know that. I found it very interesting too, how Brands calls out that everyone who met John Brown had never seen a more non-racist person like he, because, a lot of the abolitionists, yes, they were very hot and heavy for the cause of abolishing slavery. But a lot of those people, those white people, did not consider black people their equals.
It was kind of sick.
It was. It's like, wait a minute, you espouse this cause, but yet you won't sit at dinner with this person. I mean, what is going on?
Well, that's like the laws of Illinois, where they don't allow slavery, but didn't they have a law? And I could be wrong, but didn't they have a law that African Americans couldn't live there?
Yes.
I mean, how stupid is that?
Or at least it was like a town or something, like you can't live here. And so the fact that this was the 1830s, 40s, 50s, and someone had written down, they were talking about how people in the Brown household would have a meal, and there were people of color there, African Americans who were, freed or whatever, and they were all just sitting at the table together. And he called everyone he was very formal, like, this is Mr. Johnson, this is Mr. And so but he was just like the most evolved person, from
respectful.
Yes, and not racist in any way. He looked at that person and treated them as equals and really felt it. So I thought, well, that really made John Brown stand out in that time and place in a good way.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. He definitely could be, based on those character traits, he could definitely be held in higher esteem. And I know that's going to affect my teaching as I head into this spring and we get ready to talk about this. That's definitely something that's going to be added into my telling of this when I'm talking to the kids about it. That's going to definitely, I'm going to build his character up a little bit more now that I know a little bit more about him.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that was a great side to him. Then you have the other darker side, but is anything ever nice and neat in history or in life? No.
Well, and it all goes back to, he was he was so biblical with things, and that Old Testament side of him. You can't get rid of sin. Oh goodness, what's the quote? The remission of sin by blood. Help me out.
Oh yeah.
Gotta have blood.
The sins of this nation will not be washed away without the commission or the, you know what I mean? That word.
Yeah, I'm gonna mess up.
I can't think of it, of blood. And that's what he said on the way to the gallows, or he wrote it in a note and he handed it to the guard. And that was the last thing he wrote boy, talk about a prophet.
But
you saw that coming.
let me add something into this. I have a quote that I use with the kids at school with Frederick Douglass. And when in 18, and this is a little off topic, so forgive me, but
No, it's all
with
right.
the 1850 Compromise, when they got the fugitive slave law enacted, and they were trying to think of ways to repeal it and get rid of it. And Frederick Douglass makes the comment that the only way we're going to get rid of the fugitive slave law is basically by having a few dead slave catchers. That's the
Mm,
only way, So that militant side is there in many of the characters in this book. I think that's kind of interesting.
yeah.
Um, and then of course Lincoln plays on that exact opposite, where he wouldn't hurt a fly.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
Now, I'll
Oh,
tell you another thing that
tell
I
me.
learned. I can't remember if I told you this in the boxer, but when they were at Harper's Ferry and they were surrounding the armory, and Jeb Stuart goes up,
Yeah.
I did not realize that Jeb Stuart had been out west in Kansas. I had no clue on that.
Oh.
That was a new one for me.
Oh, that's right, because he did recognize Brown. That's how he knew him, was from his Kansas days.
But isn't that right? I got that right, don't I?
I think so.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
made a note on that because I thought that was interesting. Because I did not realize that.
yeah, yeah. And then their exchange, you know, Jeb Stuart wasn't, when they were interrogating him in the prison or the jail
Mm-hmm.
cell. And that was the other aspect too I found interesting about John Brown, was that everyone he met who actually interviewed him or talked to him came away feeling like they had been in the presence of
Somebody great.
someone great. And so that, even like Southern people, like I think it was
Yeah.
either Governor Wise or a Senator Mason that interrogated him, and later they were just strongly impacted by his personality, his integrity, his
Mm-hmm.
sense of right and wrong. And no one walked away untouched from that, his shining, that burning light that came from within him. It was very fierce.
Yeah, I thought the same. Something, a parallel that I saw as far as that goes is John Andre in the American Revolution, and everybody that dealt with him when he was in jail. They came
Okay.
away trying to get Washington. Yeah, you can't get rid of him like this. I know that's a really
Oh,
weird parallel, but that was something that popped in my head, was just that parallel between the two.
wow. Well, that's great. There's a
With,
book I've
with the
been wanting to
reaction,
get on John Andre.
yeah, just the reaction to meeting them, I guess. Other than that, the parallel's not there. But
Well, but yeah, but there's only a handful of people in history that you can say that have an impact, where people felt like they were in the presence of something very great, something very different. So yeah, that jumped out at me too. I thought that was interesting. The other thing that came up in our Voxer talk, I think, was let's talk about a little bit about Chief Justice Roger Tawny.
yeah.
What an interesting figure. This is okay, everybody out there. This was news to me. Like, I knew he was the guy who made the Dred Scott, he made the
Dred,
oh yeah, the Dred,
Dred,
yeah. And he ruled against Dred Scott. Um, I did not know that in his early life he was very much an abolitionist.
yeah, in a lot of cases he was for the movement in a lot of ways.
He was very much, he worked for different like charitable aid societies for freed slaves, and tried to help people escaping. And so it's just like, what happened to this guy?
That was kind of our big question in the Voxer chat, was what really made him flip. And of course we talked about a couple, the issue of with Dred Scott, that was coming to a head, and he was having to make that decision. His wife had just passed away. What else had happened? I can't remember. He had a lot of big life-changing things happen all at once,
Yeah.
and it makes you wonder: was he just a lonely old man who uh, trying to have one last stand in life?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
can't remember how I worded that in the Voxer chat, but I mean it made you ponder things.
Well, it
What?
did. Oh, let's see here. So I had some notes written down on Tawny, that he, I thought maybe he was reverting back to his ancestral home, as like, if he's gonna, since his wife and child died, it's like, where do you put your passion and your, is it back towards your homeland? I mean, I don't know what it was, but I think it was on page 111.
That's what I was looking for. I was trying to figure out what
Yeah.
page it was, because I knew I took some notes over it here.
Yep. So it was like 110 to 112. And oh, it says right here, but I don't know. This is H.W. Brands' take on it. He says Roger Taney was looking for a case that would give the Supreme Court a chance to rule on the issue that had tied the other branches of government in knots. He was also looking for something to ease his grief at the loss of his wife and daughter. Now, I don't know how you can source that. I mean, how do you really know that, unless you're looking in someone's heart, how do you, I think he was making kind of a leap there, but
Some assumptions.
he was making some assumptions. And then he kind of showed what his basis was for ruling against Dred Scott. And of course, for the purposes of this book chat, I mean, we're assuming that everyone out there knows what the Dred Scott case is, and we're assuming that they know a lot of these people that we're talking about. We're just going to have to go with that, unless you want to give them a little definition.
Well, just a quick summary, I guess. Dred Scott was a slave in Missouri. His owner had taken him north to work at the Army fort, right, in Wisconsin, correct? And so he lived on free soil. And some of the laws were, if you were living on free soil, that freed you. And his owner went back to Missouri. He lived in Wisconsin, and didn't he move? Help me out here.
Well, he returned.
Did he move?
He was in Wisconsin, but then he returned to Missouri, taking his wife and child with him. And then Dred and Harriet Scott decided to assert their freedom based on their residence in the Free Territory. So that's what happened there. I'm not sure where he moved after that. Yeah, so that's,
he lived in Illinois is what I was thinking. I was thinking he lived in Illinois.
Maybe that,
but I could be wrong. It don't matter.
People moved around a lot back then.
Yeah, and the main thing was he was suing for his freedom based on he lived on free soil, and he gets denied that, and of course it just keeps getting appealed. And his main owner had died, and he was left to the wife because he was considered property, right? And she worked. She had him working on neighboring farms to bring in income.
Yep.
Isn't that right? Yeah. And so she didn't want to lose the income, basically. Yeah. And so he was suing for freedom. That's what the whole story is about. And the problem was, if they allow that, then you're going to have every slave running away to the north, and they're going to get their automatic freedom. And that's where the big issue is. Yes.
And Roger Taney comes in, and it kind of just really blows the minds of many people, according to Brands, and that he judged against him, and people were surprised at the reasoning behind it, which took a very a very broad view, when the Supreme Court is always supposed to rule on, it says here, on the narrowest grounds possible, right? And it's almost like Tawny was being like what you might call an activist judge, but for the South. And basically, he said, you have no rights as a black man that a white man is bound to respect. I mean, it was just like this guy who had previously been so forward thinking, just threw that out on those grounds.
Well, and then you take, the issue of slavery had always been considered states' rights and, a state issue. And he was basically putting it on a national level by making that ruling. And so, you had a whole bunch of people up north up in arms about, you're not even supposed to be ruling on that, because it's a state issue, not a national issue. Right. But yeah, he went
way far, way far over, and it caused a huge, furor. And so it just seemed like it was one thing after another that just kind of, just kept pushing the country, closer and
Mhm.
closer to Civil War. But I thought his chapters on Tawny were very strong,
Yeah, I did too.
and it was very eye-opening for me. Let's see. Well, we got about 10 minutes, right,
Mhm.
before the dinner hour.
For dinner hour.
Let's see here. Anything else that you want to kind of talk about?
I was trying to flip through right fast just to see if there was questions that I'd wrote down. Um, but I think we've hit several of them already.
Yeah. Oh, I did find the chapter on the New York draft riots also very interesting.
Hmm.
Do you teach that in your class? The
I don't go into a ton of detail because our language arts does a little lesson in their class because we cross curricular. Both of us are teaching Civil War at the same time,
I see.
and so yeah, I hit a lot of just overall with the Civil War. I hit a lot of the political side of things, and then she does a lot of the stuff with slavery itself.
Okay.
And I mean, I touch slavery, but she goes real in depth with it, and I touch a lot of the political and the battles and stuff like that. And
Okay.
so when we get to the draft riots, she does some talks about the riots there, and then the ones that were the bread riots in Richmond, and hits both of those. And then it's actually kind of fun because old teacher, before she retired, her husband would bring up food. Uh, as they talked about the bread riots in Richmond, she'd bring in food to the classroom, like ice cream bars for all the kids or
Oh,
something, as they're talking about,
yeah.
needing food, wanting food.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was a fun tie-in. And but she's got some stories that are based on those New York riots, and so she hits it probably more than I do.
Okay.
But I
Well,
had in my head, if you've ever seen Gangs of New York,
mhm.
have you ever
Oh
seen that
yeah.
movie?
Oh yeah.
At the end of the movie, that's what I had pictured in my head the whole time was
Yes.
the army coming into New York and stopping the riot, and yeah.
Yeah. It was really interesting, being the Civil War fan that I am, seeing that played out on the big screen, because it's just like, wow. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that was definitely another dark chapter,
It
was
was powerful.
yeah. And it was a powerful, powerful imagery of what was going on with that. And just it always blows me away that New York was such a I mean, they wanted to secede at one point, right? New York City. They're like, no.
Oh
And
yeah.
it was all monetary, because they had all these deep ties, economic ties, cotton trading ties to the South. And um so it's just like, wow, you
Well,
know.
and that was New York. That's not anything new for them anyway. They've had multiple times in history where they've wanted to try to break away. So
That's
uh,
true.
that didn't surprise me very much.
Yeah. But it was, overall it was a great book. I think I'll just conclude my thoughts with saying, I have got a ton of H.W. Brand's books. They're above my head on the shelf behind me. This will go back up on there. I've got my Brand's books together. Um, and I did buy it, I think, just out of this is a historian I trust. I've watched him on tons of different like book TV interviews, and he's very, approachable, and tells history in a
Very
very lively
entertaining.
way. Yeah. And so, I mean, this was a well-written narrative, but it's like you were saying, it's like we didn't learn a ton of new stuff. Um, but I think I would recommend it for someone who's wanting like an entryway
Mm-hmm.
into learning a little bit about both men, John Brown and Lincoln, and you'll get a little bit of Stephen Douglas, you'll get a little bit of Frederick Douglas, and
Mm-hmm.
just there's a difference of one S in both names.
Just
And
make
one
sure you
has
keep
two
them straight.
S's. Yes. You'll get a little bit of everything in there. So I would recommend this for the general audience that not really have gone into this area before. It's highly readable. I found it very easy to read. Wasn't loaded with academic jargon and all this kind of stuff. So Yeah, overall, I would give it, well, I don't even like giving ratings, so I'll just say it's a worthwhile read.
I concur. I liked the book. It very fast paced. Um, it's some people they see a book. Wasn't it 400? Was it 400 pages?
Yeah, 400 exactly.
Yeah, and some people get a little intimidated. Some people who don't normally read those size books, but it's a 400-page book that reads probably like a 200-page book. I mean, I think it's
Yeah,
very fast paced and good for the novice. Um, Antebellum era into the Civil War era.
yeah,
Uh, I liked it.
yeah.
Like you said, it's not necessarily an academic piece, but it was definitely something that brings people's attention to the era. Maybe
Which I
that's
think,
how.
yeah, and I think it's an era that we all should know about, you know. And like you were saying, it did read like a 200-page novel, and I think, or a book, mostly because those chapters were nicely, they were
Mm-hmm.
very readable chunks, and I really appreciated that. Like,
They were not 30, 40-page
no,
chapters.
so that can be daunting. But when
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, it's another chapter, I'm making progress. And so it kind of made it so that I just wanted, I'll keep going, So it really did feel like a shorter book than it was,
Yeah.
for sure.
So
All right.
that my take on it. So
So there you have it, BookTube. And I think Bill and I, well, you feel like doing this again sometime.
yes, maybe I won't confuse my Douglases next time.
I
Yeah,
know.
I would really like to do this again. I thought it was fun. Thank you for having
Oh,
me on for chat. And
thanks for having
uh,
me on your chat. We're
yeah,
going to put it up on both of our channels. So, if you guys, wherever you land, you'll see it. So, all right. Well, until next time, just hang on one quick second. Bill, stay with me after I hit the recording button. Anyway, till next time, BookTube, we'll see you and have a great night.
yep. See ya.
Bye.